A number of people have already submitted questions, and those people that are with us this evening will be invited to present those questions to Steve. We've also had a number of people who've turned up this evening and have questions that you have posed as well. So we'll get through as many of those as we can. If any are not able to be answered this evening because of sheer time constraints, Steve and his office will respond and share that on the website. But before we get into that, I'd like to invite Steve to explain the role of Metro Mayor, and obviously for him to do his own welcome, given that this is actually his event.
Thanks, Sue. First of all, can we all thank the staff at Wirral Met, and certainly the catering staff there, some of the apprentices who are here tonight who've been serving the drinks, the coffees and teas, and they've been also doing a bit of catering for us. They've all had to go some of those lovely biscuits, which you haven't tasted yet, but I will. Also to thank my staff, because these things don't just happen by osmosis. It takes a lot of planning to do something like this. I'd like to welcome Phil Davies, who's the leader of Wirral Council as well, and everybody who's come out on, as it's been said, a cold and blustery, and now it's a rainy night. And I thought I'd start with trying to link into what the video was saying, which is that there's this thing called the Liverpool City Region, and that we have got this thing called a devolution agreement, and we've got somebody who's a Metro Mayor, because there's a lot of confusion at least of those three things. So starting with the devolution deal, it was a deal signed by Phil on behalf of the 6 leaders of the combined authority. The 6 districts coming together were Halton, Knowsley, Liverpool, St Helens, Sefton and the Wirral. And the government were offering some additional powers and resources if there was an agreement by the districts to work more collaboratively together, but also to elect somebody as a directly elected Metro Mayor for those areas. And there were 6 in the country that came together and who have accessed those additional powers and resources, and of course we're one of them. The second part is the thing about a Liverpool City Region. Why Liverpool City Region? And it's because the synergies between those 6 districts working together are much more advantageous for us as a city region than any of those individual local authorities trying to do something on their own. And I'll tease out some of the transformational aspects of that in a second. And then the last one is that we've got a Metro Mayor, and I understand the confusion of that, because we've got a city mayor over in Liverpool. Here we have a civic mayor, and then the other 4 districts we have civic mayors. On top of that, we've got a Lord Mayor of Liverpool, we've got a Lord Mayor of Hale, believe it or not, and then we have some parish mayors. So I think there are 11 people with the title of mayor, and that causes some confusion, should we say, with the electorate. But also we can't expect, with these systems that have been introduced by ourselves or by government, that people should understand that. There's still people who don't fully understand the difference between what a councillor does and what a member of parliament does. So that's all as a backdrop. But the advantages far outweigh any of the negativity of that. So we get £30 million per year of new money over a 30-year period. Now, the problem is it's not index linked, so in 30 years' time, the £30 million isn't going to be worth an awful lot. So the leaders and myself are looking at ways in which we can get a multiplier effect on that £30 million, so that in year 10, we'll have the £30 million plus a revenue stream coming back. And so 2 of the things that we think we can get that growth, that economic growth, which will provide us with the revenue stream, are as part of the devolution agreement that Phil negotiated. We have the opportunity, and it's been an opportunity that's been around for a long time, certainly since I was a young lad, but that is to harness the power of the River Mersey so that we can get clean, green, renewable and predictable energy. And that's something that really excites me, because if you have a look at what's happening around the world, there are a lot of companies who are looking, because they've signed up to be carbon neutral, they're looking at where they can go and potentially relocate where they can get clean and predictable energy from. And certainly we'll be at the forefront of that, because nobody really has got the opportunities that we have. We've got Barbo Bank, as you'll know, which is the largest offshore wind farm in Europe. As I say, the River Mersey, we've got carbon capture potential, and we've got solar in some of our areas, and that's expanding. So I want to set us up to be Britain's energy coast, to say for renewables, we are the area in the whole country that can really deliver on that. We're working with government. The second part is, as I said before, when 6 districts were working individually, this was just not possible. But we've got 2 great assets. One is in Halton, and it's called, it's a supercomputer called the Hartree supercomputer. It's a place called SciTech in Daresbury. And this supercomputer can push around big data. And then in Southport, we've got the Hibernia Link, which is a transatlantic cable that goes from, it's the UK, but it's in Southport in our area, and it goes to Nova Scotia, to North America, and to China. And the vision is for us to join, through our 6 districts, to join up the 6 districts with a loop, a digital loop, and that will provide us with the opportunity of pushing this big data around. And again, if international companies are looking to relocate, the 2 things that they need are renewable energy and digital connectivity. And so they're the big visions for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however long it takes us to develop these. But they're the big visions. But alongside that, we're integrating our investment strategy, our skills strategy, and our what we're going to have to deliver locally, which is a local industrial strategy. So we're going to pull all that together to reposition us, to really take advantage of what the opportunities are of devolution. Other areas in the country can't do what we can do. Some can do some of it, and others can look enviously at what we can do, but no one can do all of the things that we can do. Over and above that, we want to integrate our transport systems. We want to look at degree level apprenticeships and gold standard apprenticeships. We want to take away some of the burden from young people about travel. We want to look at issues around economic growth. So there are a whole host of different things that fall within that, and I'm sure that some of the questions will tease that out. So without further ado, I'll let Sue start asking the questions.
Okay, so we'll start with a question that relates to devolution, and Harry Gorman presented that question. Harry, if you just hang on a minute, someone will come with a microphone so that the people who are watching online can also hear you. Okay.
Could the region have a directly elected assembly, similar to that used in London, to properly hold the mayor to account?
There were things that were proposed during the Labour government called regional assemblies, and they had, you might remember, a referendum in the North East, and 82% of people in the North East rejected it, and soon after, the idea of having regional assemblies fell off the political map. I suppose this is an attempt, this devolution agreement that we currently have, this is an attempt at looking at as an alternative way of doing that. We used to have county councils many years ago, so this is the first time that we've had a structure that includes districts coming together. And who knows what the future might hold. The North West coming together, probably in relation to what's happening in the wider world, probably makes sense. But at the moment, we've not been offered that. We've been offered the 6 districts the opportunity to start working more closely together. In regard to the second part of it, about scrutiny, Metro mayors are probably going to be some of the most scrutinised people in the whole country. Not only do we have the opportunity of scrutiny through the 6 leaders, and their processes, because they all have to report back to their own cabinets and members and public. But we have a public question time as part of the Combined Authority agenda. We have statements and petitions that are able to go through that system. And then separate to that, we have a scrutiny committee. And the scrutiny committee is headed up by a member of any of the political parties not affiliated to what the Metro Mayor's political persuasion is. So in this case, it's a Conservative chair of the scrutiny committee, and they take their job very, very seriously, and they'll be doing, I've welcomed pre-scrutiny and post-scrutiny as well of decisions, so the whole thing is about as transparent as any political process in the whole country.
Okay, Harry. Fiona Christie has a question relating to equality. Fiona. Okay.
Hi, my question's about Give Up Your Seat campaign and why there are no women who are on your board, so no women have a vote, and how you're going to address this in the future so that women's voices will be included in the Liverpool City region.
It's not quite true that women don't have a vote, because currently, talking about giving up your seat, Mayor Joe Anderson doesn't attend the Combined Authority. His deputy, Mayor Anne O'Byrne, does, and she has voted. And to tell you the truth, the amount of times that we've actually gone to a vote, I think, is probably, well, Phil says 0. So the fact that what we normally do is discuss those issues and then try and come to a consensus view. But the point is a good one in regard to political representation of women in senior roles throughout the city region, but not just here, throughout the country. And what do we need to do? We need to do more to try and attract not just women to become councillors, but then to provide them with the opportunities to rise to the senior ranks and hopefully to become leaders. And in our city region, prior to Mary Rimmer becoming an MP, she was a leader of St Helens. So if it had been a few years ago that we had the mayoral combined authority, obviously Mary would have been there and a voting member by right. Anne O'Byrne is there and is a voting member because she's a substitute for somebody, for Joe Anderson. But what I've tried to do, given the constraints of, and people are getting this mixed up with the Constitution. The Constitution was drawn from what's called an SI, from the political orders from national government. So in Parliament, they've sat and decided what is our Constitution, that was then drawn up from that. But it's the SI that says that each of the local authority areas, the leader of that has to be a cabinet member. So it's not within the purview of the Metro Mayor or any of us to change the Constitution. But outside of that, I think there are things that we can do. And so we have done that. So the highest ranking politician outside of the 6 leaders is the Police and Crime Commissioner. And we co-opted Jane Kennedy as the Police and Crime Commissioner onto the committee. We've also looked at what we can do with mayoral advisors. So there are things that fall outside of the remit of the devolution agreement, but I'll give you an example: higher education. Higher education is absolutely essential to all of our futures. So the first thing that we did was to look at who the best person to represent universities would be, and Professor Janet Beer is the UK president of the Vice Chancellors, and so it seemed logical that we asked her, so we've invited Professor Janet Beer, and we went through a number of thematic areas where we thought we could broaden the expertise, and out of 8 areas that we identified, 7 of those were women. So we've brought them on. We've also introduced something called the Fairness and Social Justice Advisory Board, and hopefully through some of the questioning later we can go into some of the detail on that. But the person that I appointed to chair that is from the TUC, and it's Lynn Collins, who's known locally, who's a very, very strong chair. And then further than that, we're looking at our portfolio areas with the leaders. This is coming to Cabinet in the next week or 2 to see what the mechanism is so that we can offer the opportunity of deputy portfolios. And if there's a male, then it should be a female deputy so that we can get a gender balance. So we're looking at the mechanisms outside of the government orders and the Constitution that's being drawn from it to see where we can get better representation. But what I think that will do, hopefully, is we'll provide role models for people to decide that, you know, this could be a future for me. But it goes far, far deeper than that even. There's an organisation called Liverpool Girl Geeks, and when I was going around the country during the first leadership election, Yvette Cooper used to say that 82% of data coders were male. And why should that be? Because they're the real high-paid, high-value jobs of the future. And we're trying to do something locally about breaking down those barriers and smashing those glass ceilings. So we want more young girls from our area to get involved in those sort of jobs as well, to start to see whether we can address those gender stereotypes. And that's the sort of thing I think will attract young women, young girls and women into politics, and then to take an active role in their areas and hopefully to become not just the next Metro Mayor, but I'd love to hear more Scouse voices in Parliament. I want to see more Scouse women as MPs. I want to see, hopefully one day, a Scouser as the Prime Minister from any gender. I just think that we need better representation right the way across the board.
Okay. I've got a question from Charlotte Cowell-Walker from UK Youth Voice Northwest. Hello. We'll just get you a microphone.
My question is, how will our regional mayor help come up with a solution to better support the LGBT community on the Wirral? Furthermore, how can we make social housing safe and secure and permanent solutions in place to create brighter futures for all young people?
Thank you, Charlotte.
There were sort of three parts to that question, weren't there, really? The first bit is, I've mentioned this Fairness and Social Justice Advisory Board, and what that is, it's to try to get better representation from all underrepresented groups. That includes the LGBT community. And there are specific issues for people who are LGBT. You know, I think people are aware that they're more likely to be victims of violence, and unfortunately a lot of them are people who disproportionately self-harm. There are issues about the suicide rate, which again is much higher. I think it's twice as high as that of heterosexuals. So there are issues because of the pressures that people in those sort of groups are under through society. So it's a societal problem, but we can do things better locally, and the idea is to try and get that representation through bodies like it's called an acronym, FASJAB, so the Fairness and Social Justice Advisory Board. So we're looking at all those issues, and that'll be the conduit in which we push through some of these ideas. How are we going to change it? How are we going to make the society that we are representatives of a fairer society? And that's the sort of, it's the socialist principles that drive me every single day. So that's what we want to do. What was the third part of your question? Sorry.
It was about social housing and being safe and secure.
Safe and secure housing.
Yeah.
A lot of LGBT people find that they're more of a target, especially those who are transitioning, who are transgender, feel a greater target in social housing situations such as shelters, and they'd rather actually be on the streets than put themselves through that situation. So it was basically, my question was, how can we make housing more safe and secure, a place where they can, you know, a home to me is somewhere where you do feel safe. The other essentials come second. It's somewhere to lay your head. It's somewhere where you feel secure. And a lot of young people are not feeling safe and secure in these temporary housing, and they're feeling more like it's a long-term thing as well. Some of these young people have been there for many years, and they're getting isolated and feel more depressed and feel like they've just been forgotten about. And my question is what more can we do?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for people to be in one location for an extended period. One of the difficulties that people have come to see me about is the constant need to move around and not settle. But it's one of the issues that we need to address in regard to housing per se, and quite simply we don't have enough housing in the right places of the right type for the different and diverse communities that we have, an ageing population, many more people now with different needs and complex needs, but all of that is part of the housing offer that we need to get right in the city region. And I'm sure there'll be housing questions which we'll go into some detail later, but it is that sort of the need to really cater for the demand that we have now, but also to try and forecast what we're going to need in the future, because if we build stuff just for now, we're still going to have those sort of shortages. So it needs to be much more flexible, but a lot of this is delivered through the local authorities, and we've only been going just over 6 months. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we need to really start to develop further plans on, and there are some things that are coming forward. So we have to have a brownfield register before the end of the year. We've got some targets set by government called Shelmer and some other targets for housing. We're working with the housing associations. One of the mayoral advisors I spoke about earlier was a housing mayoral advisor, and that's Barbara Spicer, and she's the chair of the Liverpool City Region Housing Association, so the best person for this. So there's a whole host of different things, but really my job is about knitting all this together, coming up with the strategies that people agree to, and then delivery plans to ensure that we do what we say we're going to do.
Okay, the next question actually leads nicely on from that, and it's a question that Lee Turpin wants to raise also about housing. So just wait for your microphone, Lee, and then... Okay.
I've got too many sheets of paper. It's in this one, Got it now. Not quite. What do you think about the Wirral and Liverpool's councils not having an up-to-date plan on housing? And do you find it concerning that the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government has to do it for them?
We've got a leader of a council here. But councils are working to the deadlines to try and get what's called local plans. But the government can't abrogate responsibility for some of the confusion. There are 3 different matrices that are used and methodologies to determine what the need is in each area. And so Phil will tell you in Wirral, Shelmer is used to measure what the need is. Then there's a local assessment, and then there's a national assessment. And all those figures don't stack up because they're using different methodologies, so the formula is different on each of those cases. But that's because government are setting targets that are changing almost by the year. The latest one is at 250,000 homes that they've said they're going to build in the next few years. So we're trying to get on locally and do what we need to do to address the needs of our area. I've said that we'll build 25,000 homes by 2022. I think that's a realistic target for us. What we want to do is to look at brownfield sites first, so to look at where there needs to be remediation of land, so to decontaminate the land so that it becomes commercially viable to develop it. So we've said to the government, if they want to help us with a pilot scheme, we're more than happy to do that, to see if we can really push ahead with development, because we know that there's a definite demand for it, and we have a propensity of certain types of properties in certain areas. So in some areas student accommodation, in others like the area that I used to represent, lots of 2 up, 2 downs. There's market failure in certain areas, so we need an overall housing strategy, and that's what we're doing at the moment. And none of these things you can do in 6 months. It takes a little bit longer than that. We're doing it as quickly as we possibly can, but we need some help from government as well to enable us to achieve our goals, and that is to build housing that is affordable, and it's the right type of housing in the right area.
Okay, we have a question now from Alison Bailey-Smith relating to culture and Wirral. Alison's over there. Okay.
Hello. I'd just like to ask the Metro Mayor how the Liverpool City region can support cultural events going on in Wirral. Not necessarily financial, we're not actually looking for money, but just in terms of getting the many events that are going on in Wirral, which, you know, anyone that's involved knows there's lots and lots, out to the wider region. We recognise that we are part of a bigger picture, and it seems like Liverpool is quite interested in finding out what we're doing, but we're not quite sure how we go about getting it out there.
The leader of your council's here, so never ever say you don't need any more money. That's the first thing that anyone ever asks for. But you're right, there are things outside of just pure financial considerations that we can do. And one of the offers that we're looking at is to attract people to stay a little bit longer. So when they come to Liverpool, for instance, for a day trip or a couple of days, is to say if they extended it over long weekends, that they could come over to see some of the gems on the Wirral Peninsula, or to go to Southport, or to have a look at what happens in St Helens with the World of Glass, or wherever it might be, but to see whether we can get them to stay in the city region, obviously then to spend their money in the city region, but to have a look at some of the things outside of just Liverpool city centre. And to do that, we can make things easier for them to travel, for instance. We're looking at the potential for a new ferry to cross the Mersey, and that will hopefully be able to run more frequently, and it doesn't have some of the problems of breaking down and etc, etc. But they're the sort of issues that we're trying to see whether we can do outside of the cultural offer, because we've got a fantastic cultural offer. The big issue when I was a member of the DCMS Select Committee, Department of Culture, Media and Sport Select in Parliament, was that we had international visitors and they all centred on London. And as Visit Britain and Visit England, I don't think we've done a good enough job in selling, if you like, the provinces, areas like ours, so that people didn't just stay in London, they visited areas like ours. And it's the same, I think, what we're doing locally. People are staying in Liverpool and just visiting the city centre and the surrounding areas there. We need to get them out and to see a lot more of what we have to offer. And I know Phil, who's the cultural lead for this, and he might want to say something about it, but Phil's got the portfolio within the Combined Authority for Culture. We're in the process of, again, developing a strategy, and it's not just to develop strategies for the sake of it, it's to do some of the things that you think that we should be doing. From that, we'll have a delivery plan, but we have to identify what are the barriers to people who come into the city region but just stay in the one area. What are their barriers? How can we attract them to go and see some of the wider sites? So I think Phil's going to just update you what's happening in Wirral, if that's all right.
I would wait to the next question, because the next question, and then you can answer the two, it relates to this, and it's actually Kim Rawlinson, who is looking at, is Kim here? Kim, who is looking at a similar means of how we can be helped to generate more income through the visitor economy. So, Kim, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks. And I know you've covered some of this already, Steve, but my question is, Wirral has declared its ambition to substantially grow its visitor numbers, and you know, as you said, it's got a fantastic offer in terms of coastline, countryside, championship golf courses, and of course the best view of Liverpool's iconic waterfront. And my question is sort of using Liverpool as the attack brand. How can, through strategic policies, we get some of that success going to the other regions of the city, and how, with local authorities having scarcer resources, how can they work together again to grow the duration of destinations and also numbers generally.
I just thought they joined up nicely, so don't know who's... Yeah, Phil's going to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I kind of wear two hats because, as Steve said, I've got that kind of culture brief along with economic development on the combined authority, but obviously wearing my Wirral leaders hat as well. One thing I would say is what has been really refreshing for me is how Wirral and Liverpool are working probably closer together on this agenda than I've ever known before. You know, we've really got a very strong relationship with the city and the officers who are involved in culture and the visitor economy, and we've developed a number of joint events. So the River of Light, the fireworks festival, was an example of how the two councils worked together for an event which attracted a lot of visitors. We've got next year we've got the tall ships, and of course the giants coming back in October, and they're coming to Wirral and Liverpool. So we've got a very strong relationship now with my counterparts in Liverpool. But more broadly than that, as a city region, we are working on a whole range of issues, one of which is a Liverpool City region-wide events calendar, because I think you asked a great question: how can we ensure that the visitors that come to the city region don't just stay in Liverpool, but enjoy the wonderful assets that not just Wirral but the other districts have, and that we can attract them. So we are working kind of corporately with all the councils now on an events calendar, and also there'll be more announcements about this in the new year, about a really exciting way of showcasing the best of what we've got. So in Wirral, you know, the Port Sunlight and the Priory and the Williamson, the Lady Lever, New Brighton, all of the assets that we've got, but also the other districts. So there will be an opportunity when we sort of launch our plan in the new year, that we will be attracting not visitors to Liverpool. Liverpool will always be the attack brand because it's known nationally, internationally, but there's a determination that all the districts will benefit from the visitors that come into the city, and that we will positively advertise, promote, direct them to the wonderful assets that we and the other districts have got. So I can't go into more detail at the moment, but look out for those announcements in the new year, because I think they'll be really exciting.
We don't ask for money in the creative community because we actually give the council money. My organisation has handed over £4,000 to council funds this year as part of the creative community. We are a big asset to Wirral. Why is Liverpool the place to come? It should be the Wirral place to come. We have got so much going on. We have 3 major festivals. We have a fantastic art gallery. We have lots of art exhibitions. We have lots of craft things that are going on. People shouldn't have to just go straight to Liverpool and then come here. They should be coming here to the Wirral. And we don't ask for money because we contribute. We are entrepreneurs and we should be treated that way.
Okay, thank you. A question now from Mike Connolly. Where's Mike? Mike, okay. Let's get the mic to Mike. There's a joke there.
My question for the Mayor is the Liverpool City region's economy in good shape to survive Brexit? And what plans do you have in place to ensure Liverpool keeps its competitive edge?
I don't know, because we don't know what Brexit is going to mean. I'm a committed pro-European, believe that the decision that the UK made will be proven to be the wrong decision. and it'll be damaging, and we'll feel the aftershocks right the way across this end of the country, the north end of the country. But also somebody who is a half glass full person, and I think that we could disproportionately benefit, if there are to be any benefits, from being a western facing port and having historic transatlantic links and having a post-Panamax facility. And that's why we're really working to ensure that the government fulfills its promise that we will get west-east connectivity. So we will join up Liverpool with Manchester, Manchester with Leeds, Leeds with Sheffield, and right the way across the Hull, so we get that northern corridor working, so we can get the agglomeration effect of economic growth. And myself and Andy Burnham have an evidence-based approach to this, which now demonstrates that the Liverpool to Manchester leg of that is the most economically viable, gives you the biggest GVA return. But not just that, the growth between Liverpool and London is now higher than anywhere else other than Manchester to London, higher than anywhere else in the north. So it was always deemed that Leeds was much higher than Liverpool. It's not. So we've got all of the evidence, and we've put that to ministers. We've put it to the chair of the National Infrastructure Council, Lord Adonis. We think we've got a very, very strong case now that says that we need not just the connectivity, but the capacity. Because I don't know whether you know about the stuff that comes into the port that goes to Drax. It takes 9 hours, and somebody said you can actually cycle quicker to Drax than to send this stuff by train, and that's because we don't have the capacity. We need to increase capacity, and it's not just about the speed of the trains or the journey times that we need to sort out. It's also about being able to put freight onto rail to get those HGVs off the road and all that. So I genuinely don't know the answer. I'm very, very fearful of what happens post-Brexit. But instead of moaning when it happens, we've tried to affect what happens for our area. So I met with David Davis, with Andy Burnham, and with a guy called Ben Houchin from Tees Valley. We met in York to say that we believe there'll be a differential settlement for areas like ours, and the government need to work with us because we're not London and we're not the City of London. We have very different industries, and certainly the knock-on effect could really hammer areas like the northeast more than us potentially, but could really batter us. So what are the opportunities for us, but where is the transitional funding also coming from? R&D in our universities, for instance. So there's a whole host of different economic factors that we need to consider. But if the government work with us, then we might well be able to capitalise on some of, if there are advantages of Brexit. But some of those things we might be able to do better in our area than a non-port city.
Okay, is Anthony Hanlon here? Anthony's got a more local question, but the recent news has really been quite dominated with some of the issues from here. So let's get the mic to Anthony.
The integrated transport system is a priority, and the river is a natural barrier with several methods of crossing the river, by road, rail, tunnels, and 2 road bridges, both of which have been in the news lately. And we've also got a foot passenger ferry, which doesn't seem to work very well. The tolls and any other funding collected, could you tell us how they are allocated, and any revenue streams that come in? What's going to happen as a priority for the river crossings?
Well, the tolls, the vast majority of the money goes into the maintenance of those tolls and to staff and to the ongoing programme of improvements. So you remember a few years ago when you had to have the escape access exits put in, that costs millions of pounds, and there's lots and lots of improvements that have to happen on a daily basis. Save on the ferries, really, the aging ferries. The reason that I was saying about we need a new ferry is not just because we'd like a new ferry. Sometimes, like, it's when you've got a car and it becomes too expensive to keep maintaining, it's better to get a new car. So we're looking at that, and then what happens with the ferry that obviously it'll displace. For me, I understand people saying that they believe that the river's a barrier, certainly because now you have to pay for every way in which you get across it. Beforehand, you could go over the Runcorn Bridge, it was the Silver Jubilee Bridge, and now that's not available, that's closed down until it's repaired and maintained. If you go over the Mersey Gateway, that's £2 a crossing. The Mersey Gateway falls outside of the remit of the Metro Mayor and the Combined Authority. It was a deal between Halton and the government. But on our side, we're looking at how it may be possible to reduce the cost burden of crossing the River Mersey, and also trying to keep the fares down, for instance, on the trains. Huge pressures on us because in the last 3 years there's been a £32 million reduction in what's called the levy, so the money that you pay through your council tax. So there's been £32 million reduced there, and that's had a knock-on effect to a lot of the services. But we still have the most generous concessionary travel scheme outside of London. So at 60 in our area, you're entitled to a free bus pass. Everywhere else outside of London, by the way, it's 67, and it's going upwards. And that's putting huge pressures on us because of an ageing population. So some of the revenues are used to subsidise that. And on the Wirral, in the more outlying districts, the more rural areas, where buses are not as commercially viable as they are, say, in the built-up areas in the city or in the likes of Knowsley. We support more buses here, so the supported bus network is greater here than there is in some of the other areas. And that's for the Combined Authority to decide on how it allocates those budgets. And those meetings are public. You can come and see what we do, and we try to see if we can squeeze every single penny that we possibly can out of the system so that we can put it into frontline services to improve them. And we've done rather well. The Liverpool City Region Combined Authority has just won Combined Authority of the Year in the Transport Awards because of what Mersey Travel have done over the last 12 months. You know, the slab track stuff that they did, which really affected people over here, but I remember it was the doomsday scenario. It was going to be apocalyptic for people to travel, and actually it went fairly smoothly. We prefer that it wasn't done, but given that it had to be done, all of that pre-planning really came to fruition. They've been closing Lime Street Station down, as you know, and there's going to be further closures on that so that they can get 2 more train lines in. That was planned through Mersey Travel again. So these things cost big money. The rolling stock is £460 million. That has to be paid for by us. The Halton Curve was £17.9 million. There's a new station in Maghull North. There are line improvements and station improvements all over. There are improvements to bus stops, and we want to try and get audio-visual involved in that as well, so that people who have problems they haven't got an app, for instance, can see where the next bus. So there's all of those things which all cost a lot of money. And believe me, there's not a magic money tree for us. We have to try and see what we get in revenues and then use that as best as we possibly can across the whole transport network.
Okay, is Rita Bird here? Rita, you had a question about what precisely Mersey Travel can guarantee with your department, Steve, buses to serve left-behind communities. So Steve just answered a bit of that, but do you want to have the microphone to just describe a bit what you mean about left-behind communities and whether that's answered your question? And then we can...
It's very local. and it ties in with other public services which affect part of the community that I come from, which is in the southern part of the borough of Wirral, an area called Eastham, which adjoins Clatterbridge and Bromborough and other areas close by. And there was a National Health Service walk-in centre, which closed that walk-in service on the same day that some buses were removed. So we just wondered, you know, in view of the Metro Mayor wanting very much to include communities left behind, how the schemes he's just outlined would deal with those kinds of problematic situations where there's more than one public service involved.
Hey, is that one
Do you want to start, and then you could, because I don't know the specifics of that. When I stood for selection and then when I stood for election, the motto that I used was "No borough left behind." So I suppose it fits very nicely into how am I going to ensure that no borough is left behind, and that's equality of opportunity. So I don't really know the circumstances of the walk-in centre that was closed in Eastham. Phil, I think, will address that. But when you've got more than one thing happening at the same time, that's where it needs to be. You know, we need a coordinated strategy to start to address that. Local councils in this new structure don't disappear. So Phil is still the leader of your council, and those services are delivered by councils. Ours is about trying to get the strategy right so that we can get more money from central government. And what's happened all too often in the past is that Manchester have had strategies where they've had almost oven-ready projects, so that when the government's looking round at where it can spend some of UK PLC's tax take, they've said, well, we've got one of those, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to develop the schemes, but of course I'm very cognizant of the fact that locally stuff that happens there does have a knock-on effect. So if bus services on the same day that something else closes down aren't running, then it causes local people difficulties. But I think Phil will address the Eastham stuff.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I mean, Rika makes an important point, and obviously I'm very familiar with the situation in Eastham. I think just one general point. I mean, Wirral Council pays, as all the Merseyside councils, the Liverpool City Region councils, pay a levy towards running Mersey travel. Wirral pays 28 million, so that's a big amount. And one of the problems as government has cut our grant, clearly we've been under pressure to keep the lid on these big chunks of money, like the money for Mersey travel that goes out of our coffers, purely because, you know, I've got children's social care to fund and some of the big statutory services. So all of the 6 councils are under huge pressure with their budgets, and you know, there's an incredible tension to make sure that we can keep all our basic services going, but also pay enough to Mersey travel to keep a good public transport system. So that's a kind of dilemma that we grapple with from year to year. On the issue of the Eastham Walk-in Centre, obviously, you know, it was a shattering blow when we heard that the Walk-in Centre was going to close, and you know, you'll be familiar that as a council we got hardly any notice of this. I think we got about a week's notice, and the good news though is, as a result of the campaign, that not just the council and the councillors wage, but members of the community and residents in that area, the CCG have announced that the walk-in centre will reopen in January, which is really good news. And I think it's an example of, you know, pressure that's been put on. But you're right, on the day that they announced the closure of the walk-in centre, there was the announcement that Mersey Travel was taking one of the key bus services from Eastham, because basically what happened, Steve, is the staff from the walk-in centre in Eastham was transferred to Arrow Park because of the Arrow Park weren't able to meet their A&E targets. So basically, people from Eastham couldn't get to Arrow Park because that bus service was. 57 minutes to get Exactly. So it was a real double whammy. But as I say, I'm pleased to say, as a result of the pressure that we put on the CCG, they've announced it will reopen in the new year, which is really good news. Yeah.
Okay, Adrian Melrose? No? Okay, I'll come back to questions. I'll deal with the questions that we've got with people here first, and then we'll come back to any if we have time at the end. Karen Ryan. Karen, she's over here. Over the other side.
Hello, I'm a PhD student and my topic of research is going to be city regional devolution. One of the questions I'd like to ask is, as the regional mayor, how are you going to ensure that all the districts are treated fairly and that it's not going to be Liverpool city centre based? I've just done my dissertation on my master's and I did concentrate on Liverpool and why Joe is probably a very good mayor for Liverpool. That's as far as his eyesight goes, is the city centre. Are you going to ensure that that's not going to happen? That everything won't be concentrated just purely on Liverpool city centre? How are you going to cross the river barrier and ensure that Wirral is treated just as fairly?
It stems from what I said earlier about the pledge that I made about no borough left behind. So it is about ensuring that everybody has the same access to the funding pots, because that's basically what we do. So we're looking at big strategic projects. For instance, if we harness the power of the River Mersey, all 6 districts would benefit equally. If we had, for instance, a joint venture, then the revenue return would be for the 6 districts to decide on how that is distributed or reinvested, or however it's used. But what I would say is, I don't think there's any problems with leaders from the areas that they're elected to represent fighting their corner for a share of the pot. And Phil does it on a weekly basis, believe me. He's, first and foremost, he's there as the leader of Wirral and wants the best for Wirral. But we do look beyond that, and we look at what we can do with the, as I said before, the synergies and the scale of 6 working together. I know, and I'm not able to say from whom tonight, but there was an occasion where we had more than one of our districts competing against each other for inward investment for jobs, and we lost out. And we lost out because of that competition between people trying to outdo each other. The way we work now, Phil mentioned it much earlier, with Liverpool, but across the 6, I'd say, not just between Wirral and Liverpool, is the relationships are maturing much faster than I think any of us probably envisaged when, you'll know this from your dissertation, when the deal was signed in November 2015. And I'd love to see your dissertation, by the way, because I think it'll be a fascinating read. But we have the structures and the processes in place now that ensures that anybody can come in and take a look at what it is that we're doing, and everybody gets a fair crack of the whip. So if people have got the projects that they want to be assessed, they are all assessed on the same criterion. So the business case that somebody puts is fairly assessed, not just fairly assessed, but it's independently monitored as well. So it doesn't mean that anybody can just grab everything off the table. It means that we have a proper, transparent process in which people have to follow, and that's what we're doing at the moment. But I can assure you, from my perspective, that I'm not treating any one area any different than anywhere else. I'm a Kirby lad, so I spent my formative years in Knowsley. When I was 18, I was lucky enough to get a job in St Helens. I was a bricklayer and went to build a UK 5 site in St Helens. So spent many years there, so I've got a massive affinity for that. And I worked in Liverpool as well as a business manager for the Learning Skills Council. But as part of that, I also worked over in the Wirral. So I think I understand that they're all different. All those areas are different and all have their individual identities. But it's much more powerful when we're coming together to try and see whether we can get those additional resources that areas like ours are crying out for.
Okay, I'm going to start working through some of the questions here that the people aren't necessarily here this evening, or maybe watching online. There was just a question and a point made before about the creative community, and this is a very specific question that leads on from that, from Susan Lee Brown, which is that the creative community was promised reciprocal advertising within the region and outside. When's it going to happen?
I don't know what that means. It's reciprocal advertising.
I don't know, that's in the question. Oh, we have, sorry, Susan, I didn't realise it was that you were here. Okay.
Sorry for my earlier round, but when the city region was first put together, the creative community was promised that we would have reciprocal advertising within the community. I know what's going on in Knowsley and St Helens, but they don't know what's going on here. It seems to be more Liverpool-centric, our advertising. I know what you said about an events calendar and things like that. Where's it going? You also said we're not doing a good job of getting people out of London and up to here. What you going to do about it? We're not asking for money.
Yeah.
We never have. We are an income stream for the council. All the creatives are. I know we're not a large income stream, but we still are an income stream. We could be bigger if we could just get people to know about our events.
Of course, and our visitor economy is booming at the moment, and it is about trying to get those people to go and see more than the one thing that they come into Liverpool or Wirral or Knowsley or wherever for. Don't forget, the Grand National is not in Liverpool. It's in Sefton. And so we need to get people who go into the Grand National to watch those 3 days of racing, to stay in Sefton, to visit areas in Sefton and all that sort of stuff. I still don't know what the reciprocal arrangements were, and maybe Phil might know, but I'm meeting Phil Redmond, and Phil, I think, met him today, and Phil Redmond is about to come forward with a draft of the cultural strategy. And my team are here, so we'll make certain that we speak to you at the end to see whether we can pick that specific issue up. But you said about what did I do about trying to get those people who go to the capital to come here, and I think it wasn't for me, I pointed it out, but it's for 2 agencies that are funded through our national government and through Visit Great Britain and Visit England. So I said to them, I wanted to see the proportion of marketing and advertising that had something about Liverpool or the city region on it, and they came up with very, very little. And that's because everything is, you think it's Liverpool centric. Well, believe me, the country is London centric, and we need to get away from that mentality first. And if we get them here as the city region metro mayor, that's a good thing. If we get them here, I'd like to obviously to see that spread out, but just to get them here is the main thing. So I'll be trying to attract them to the big ticket items that might whet their appetite. So for instance, whether you like it or not, the Beatles are still an international brand, and people do come over here. What we need to do is when they come over to see the Beatles and go to the Cavern or wherever, to say it's not just about the Beatles, and look what else that we've got. That's what Phil's saying about that events calendar. In the past, we've had different boroughs with something on in the same day, competing against each other for the limited number of people. So I I've asked a mayoral advisor called Sarah Wild McEwen, who's the chair of the LEP Visitor Economy. She's my mayoral advisor, and I've asked her to start looking at what it is that we need to do as the 6 districts, not just to work more closely together, but to get our advertising and marketing offer right, so that when people come in here, you know, come wherever they come to, so they come to the Wirral, that we can say there's also something tomorrow on in such and such a place. Not only that, then to say, and you can get there by this method, and then to get the transport right, and then to say, and if you're there, you might want to stay there because there's this, you know, hotel or whatever it might be. It's the whole package that we haven't quite got right, and this is a massive opportunity for us really to start looking at those agglomeration effects.
Okay, can I just ask 2 little questions for the groups that are in? One is, where is this calendar? And 2 is, how can they advertise on it for free? Oh, right, okay.
I'm actually freelance, work for the Williamson Art Gallery, but I'm paid for by a charity because there's no money from council to pay for me. I'm now working for 2 or 3 people, so I'm trying to get out and network like crazy at the moment. So I went to the Liverpool 2018 launch, and I was really heartened to see that they were really open to what was going on in Wirral. It has taken about 5 emails to get me onto this Liverpool Clash diary. That's what it's called, the Liverpool Clash diary. So basically it's to try to encourage you not to have an event when there's something big going on in Liverpool, and hopefully vice versa. I think actually what is needed is something which is public, so that everyone can see what's going on, so that you can plan and say, okay, I'm coming to Liverpool for the Beatles, but what else is great, and come over here. I actually think I'm quite happy to be centred around Liverpool, and that the Wirral is an extra and a bonus, because I do think there's a lot to see. But I think let's take cautious steps to begin with, and use the fact that we're next to a really big city that is going places, and I feel like we can tag along and we can put the word out there. The thing that I have a problem with is the fact that some of the network organisations will not share information. So, for example, if I'm organising a big event at the Williamson, if I ask Mersey Ferries to share it, they will not share it. I administer what's on Liverpool and what's on Wirral for Facebook. I share like crazy about every organisation. It doesn't matter if it clashes with what I'm doing at the Williamson or West Kirby Arts Centre. It's to do with us saying there's a lot going on culturally here. And I don't understand why Mersey Travel and Mersey Ferries don't share for us. And I think there's someone here from Mersey Travel. Is there?
Okay, I think point well made, and I think if we have a calendar that's Wirral, that's shared with Liverpool, I think if you can...
That's exactly what we're...
Yeah, okay. So can we from this put the link on the website as to any organisation wants to share that, so that the people can get that?
And again, Sue, I'm happy to stay behind at the end if you want to talk about the specifics of why Mersey Travel won't share information. I don't know.
Sorry. I'm sure
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've got a few. I think we've done this question now. I think I need to move on to get some others.
We'll see
Is
each
that
other
okay?
at the end. The one thing I will say is we are really fortunate in as much as Phil and the other leaders sneaked culture into our devolution agreement. So it is something that we have to make work. And we're the only area in the whole country that has devolution, as culture as a devolved issue.
Which is brilliant, and the Williamson's brilliant. Anyway, moving on. Darren May, he isn't here, but his question is, I'm a big fan of politicians working together to make the lives of ordinary people better. With that in mind, I'd like to know how our Mayor works with parties other than Labour to ensure we have a wealth and breadth of ideas to make our society closer and more prosperous.
Oh, you're not?
I'm sorry.
Do you want to read your question out?
I'm sorry, was that okay? Because you'd put that in, is that okay? Yeah.
It's a great question. And when I was a member of Parliament, when I was a councillor, but when I was a member of Parliament, it's adversarial. So you are party political point scoring. That's the game, unfortunately. And I was really turned off by that at a national level. And that's why I think this role is a huge opportunity to get away from some of that. So we do work cross-party. and we have to, because the government of the day is of a different political persuasion. So we just have to, because otherwise we won't get a Meg, and that's the alternative. But beyond that, we're also looking at issues where there are opportunity for us more locally. So, for instance, violence against women and girls, I don't think that should be a party political issue. It shouldn't be a football for us to try and kick around. We need to develop a strategy. So one of my opponents from the Women's Equality Party, when we were going through the election process, was saying, you know, we need to do something about this collectively. And so she was invited onto a group, and we're starting to develop that along with Jane Kennedy, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner, and anybody else from any party who wants to come along. So it was literally open to anybody. And where there are issues that we can work closely together, we should do. But we also have to remember that sometimes, despite that offer, so the new ferry explosion was a great opportunity for others to work with us in a cross-party collaboration. And we, through the offer, open to Jake Berry to come, to have a look round with his own two eyes, because it's different when you see it, when people describe it. And when it was described previously, there was barriers there when Warren Ward asked me to go, and I couldn't actually get close to it to see it. You see some of the devastation. But when we could go and really see how much it had blighted and affected the area, then I think that was an opportunity for cross-party collaboration. And it's a two-way street. And literally we didn't get anything at all, no help at all from the government. And I think on those circumstances, it's right to be critical of government, because in other areas they did offer support, and they hid behind a formula and a methodology that they said we didn't reach the threshold on. And I just think that's absolute nonsense when people were suffering, businesses were going out of business, and the council were carrying the burden of £300,000 initially, and much more since. But to try and tackle those issues wherever I possibly can, I will do. We'll look for consensus as well. I told you before about the chair of the scrutiny committee is somebody from the Conservative Party. So we are doing what we can do, but it has to be both ways. And you know, sometimes when you offer somebody something several times, and if you keep on getting smacked in the face, you don't offer it again. So wherever we can, I think we'll try and do it.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question, but before I ask it, is Nick Drew here? Okay, well, he sent in this question, which is, Manchester has a carbon literacy programme. What plans does the Metro Mayor have to engage the people of the Liverpool City region in helping to make this big transition in our society to become a zero carbon city region by 2040?
The reason that the question is predicated on becoming a carbon neutral city region by 2040 is because it's a manifesto pledge, and that is because we need to do something not just about what's happening with some of the emissions and the air quality, but because I think this is an opportunity for us. It's not being a hippie or anything, but it's an opportunity for us economically to really start to see the benefit of the new technologies. So stuff that's being developed in our university to save carbon, we can develop that into products, and we can get manufacturing jobs out of that. We can also use the IP, the intellectual property for it, to see whether we can get a financial return. There's a lot of things that we can do. I mentioned before, for instance, about being Britain's energy coast. We're going to have a northwest energy hub in our city region. There's lots of things that we have advantages of. How about with carbon, with hydrogen capture? How about hydrogen buses? If they needed to be developed, why not develop them in our city region? That would create jobs, huge jobs. There's a proposal for a hydrogen train. Now, that's through Alstom in Halton. Again, it'll be a first, and if we were to do that, that would again create, you know, God knows how many thousands of jobs. So it's not just about doing it for the right reasons, which are to protect the environment and to clean up our air quality and all the health issues that are associated with that. Huge increase in asthma, for instance, especially in young people. But it's also, I think, we can get jobs and apprenticeships and economic growth, and we can be a world leader. And so it's a double-edged sword, really. We can do more by working together as 6 districts to try and tackle environmental issues, but also to try and get that expertise from our universities linked in to research and development, and then to advanced manufacturing for the future.
Okay, so that's all we've got time for this evening, but I know that Steve has got other events planned, and if you check out facebook.com/Steve Rotherham, you'll find out where they are. Rotherham. And if you have a question, or a question occurs to you after you leave, #AskSteveLCR, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer the question. Thank you very much for coming to the college this evening and for giving our students the opportunity to show off their skills in hospitality and catering. Thank you.
Thank you.